think that's a great place to start with this, especially if you are new to my channel. And if you're new to my channel, welcome in. I am very glad to have you here. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's jump right into our subject at hand. So we are talking about the common question that so many people get stuck on. Who is and what is the authentic God? Is it Yahweh? Is it Jesus? Is it Muhammad? Is it Buddha? Is it fill in the blank? Is it Satan? Is it Lucifer, etc.? And the reality to this question is that there is not necessarily a one and only God. When it comes to these different titles and these different names that are given to these different entities or energies, these are all fragments and these are all aspects, we could say, of the larger source consciousness. So if there's anything that is a God or that we could consider to be the one and only God, what that really is it is a source consciousness. And this is an ever-expanding, infinite expanding source of energy that is the absolute source of all things and is infinitely creating from itself. So this source is so vast and so infinite that even for me to sit here and try to explain this and break this down in words, it really doesn't even make sense. There's really no words that can actually put this energy into a box so that we can actually digest it and understand it. Now, I can do my best to break this down in as practical as a way as I can, and you can understand some of these things, but in reality, this source energy that is the source of all things, infinitely creating from itself, is so beyond what us as humans can really grasp in regards to our logical understandings. This is what the authentic God would be if there is such thing. It is this source consciousness that runs through all things and creates all things as aspects of itself to interact with itself, to go through a process of evolution and development to experience itself. So you as the listener are an aspect of this source. You are just as much this source as the source is itself. Just like the source is you. You are the source. I am the source. Your neighbor is the source. Your enemy is the source. Your dog is the source. Your table, your cup, your chair, all of these things carry this essence of the authentic source consciousness. And this is literally why everything, truly, all things are connected together. There is nothing outside of self because all things are truly connected to this source energy at its highest level. So with that being said, there are obviously degrees and there are layers to source vibration or source consciousness. Something that, let's say, resonates at a higher level of that source consciousness doesn't mean that it's more of the source than something that's lower than it. It's just at a different resonance. So, for example, us as human beings with the certain types of consciousness that it is that we have, we're at a certain resonance at a collective consciousness as human beings on planet Earth. Then there are other star systems with different types of intelligent life on them that may be at a different resonance than us, but are still aspects of this source consciousness as well. Okay? So when it comes to gods, which largely are energies that are looked up to, and oftentimes are energies that can largely be responsible for evolutionary processes of lower density consciousness, right? So when we look at Yahweh, when we look at Christ consciousness, when we look at, archangels, when we look at the demons, These are higher density energies in regards to resonance, higher density resonance than where we are as humans. And that's oftentimes why we look at these energies as if they are God, or as if they are closer to that source consciousness than what we are. But we are still a part of that same source consciousness. We are still the source, just like these energies are the source as well. So the thing that religious indoctrination and what religious programming does is it leads us to believe that these certain types of energies, like Yahweh, like Jesus, like Muhammad, like Buddha, it leads us to believe that these are the only monotheistic God. This is the one and only God, which means everything else that is outside of that is not God. And the only way into salvation and the only way into healthy soul healing and development is through this one energy. Okay? When in reality, that's not the case whatsoever, like at all. And these different types of energies that are resonating at a higher density, they know this, they understand this. So this is man-made propaganda, or this is man-made programming placed into modern time religion to lead consciousness into one energy, because when consciousness is now led into one energy, now it can be much more easily manipulated. And it can set the stage for a false foundation within self to see things as separate from self. So if we all believe that, for example, Yahweh is the only one God, the true God, immediately with that, we are now separating other energies. We're separating other people from this source connection, because Yahweh is the only source. It is the only God. And that starts to hinder us and hurt us, because everything outside of the self, outside of us, is parts and aspects of that same source consciousness that in many ways are also reflections of ourself. So once again, when we start to see things from that dualistic lens of good and evil, demonizing negative, venerating what seems to be positive, and then inverting the two, and then we start to separate other people from self, other energies from Yahweh and from self, now we're starting to, walk in muddy waters, because we're not understanding the true reality of how things actually are functioning at large within our universe. And that sets the stage for us to be easily taken advantage of and easily manipulated. Okay? So with that being said, when it comes to God, God is the source, and all things are connected to the source. So all things carry that seed of God within them. There are different resonances of this source energy within different beings, different people even, which can help guide other beings or other people in lower densities to understanding these types of truths, to understanding this type of awareness. That's what I'm doing right now, and what I do at large with what it is that I teach and how it is that I work with people. I help people understand these things that oftentimes are misunderstood and aren't talked about enough in our today's time. Within every single solar system, there is a microcosmic manifestation of God, or there is a microcosmic manifestation of source consciousness within every solar system. And then within every galaxy, there is another microcosmic manifestation of that source intelligence embodied within a planetary energy, within a star system energy, within an actual extraterrestrial intelligence. And then, of course, within every universe, there is a microcosmic manifestation that is responsible for being the source of that environment or the source of that universe. And then outside of that, there is another source. And outside of that, and it just infinitely expands until there is a singular source energy that generates and runs through all things. And that's where this gets extremely hard to actually wrap our logical minds around, because if you think of something that is generating from itself infinitely, you can imagine how many layers there are to this source consciousness. But what I really want you to know is that, like, for example, when you work for a certain company, you're going to see that there are employees, and then there's team leaders, and then there's managers, and then there's there's managers for the managers, and then there's bosses, and then CEOs, etc. It's like these microcosmic manifestations of the source consciousness rising up in its resonance, rising up in its density, that then plays evolutionary supportive roles for things that are lower down in resonance and lower down in density, to support that lower density to evolve and to grow and to heal. So this is the nature of God. God is running through all things. You are God. I am God. Your neighbor is God. Your desk is God. Your chair is God. The piece of paper, plastic, trash, it all is God. And there is no such thing as only one singular God. And everything outside of that God is not God, or is a false God. That is religious programming at its finest, once again designed to mislead you from the true understandings of cosmic law and the true understandings of nature and the connectedness of all things, and the reality that you carry this source power within yourself that literally can be accessed within the process of soul development. But of course, in our today's time, with the way that there is a lot of religious indoctrination, it's a part of our planet. That's simply a part of the process. These are not bad things. These are not wrong things. It just is what it is, and it's a part of this system that we live in. And ultimately, you as the listener are going to be responsible for how you receive this information and how you integrate it and how you understand it, and really allow yourself to process it by being receptive to what it is that I'm speaking about. If you choose to see a monotheistic energy as being the one and only God, that's completely fine. There's no judgment there. But just know that you're also subscribing yourself to something that is going to cut off other parts of yourself, that is going to put you in a trajectory of repression and in a trajectory of never fully understanding the full reality of what it is that we're actually living in. And that's going to keep you from literally being your most powerful self and your most authentic self. Okay? So once again, we want to really see that religious aspect of things and how that's been pushed into the psyche of so many people in our collective consciousness, and how this is kind of cycling itself within, the masses, within the mass consciousness. People say this stuff and they don't even really understand what it is that they're talking about. They don't even really understand what it is that they're truly saying. Like, they don't really feel into it. They don't really sink into it. It's just something that's kind of said over and over and over again. And then there's a couple scriptures that confirm these things. And then it's taken as full truth and it's taken as full reality, because it's easier to just believe that than it is to actually start to understand all things are truly connected. And there isn't one monotheistic source. There is a one source energy that is everything as well. Okay, it runs through all things. So this is why I always say there truly is no such thing as good and evil, because all things are connected to the same source. So how could evil exist if the source created something to be what you're calling evil, when the source's nature is unconditional love and presence and evolution? So it really goes to show that yes, things can be corrupt and they can seem very scary, adversarial, and quite catalytic, but there's still a reason as to why it's there why it's there in general. There's a purpose to it regardless. Just like there's a purpose to positive and healthy creation and healthy growth, there's a purpose to destruction and catalyst and resistance at times. So we want to really understand this perspective. And then once again, for those of you that go deeper with your studies, you can understand there is a source being, a source intelligence that runs within our solar system specifically. So this is where the concept of different deities, different entities, different gods come into play, because there are certain energies that actually can be communicated with, whether you're doing it just through intention, through prayer, through ritual, through invocation, it doesn't matter, through observation. There are certain intelligences and energies that are very powerful and that are very high in their density of resonance that you can call into your body or call into your nervous system to gain insight, to gain understanding, and to go through transformative processes within the nervous system and within the emotional, energetic body. So there's a source that manifests in the solar system, and then there's a source that manifests in the galaxy. And then there's a bunch of other energies and entities that operate under that source intelligence to play specific roles within the ecosystem of the galaxy itself and of the solar system itself to help evolution unfold. There is a polarity that exists within our universe, within the galaxy, of a positive and a negative polarity. This is where the concept of angelic and demonic comes into play. Certain souls are more negatively polarized, whereas other souls are more positively polarized. Doesn't mean that one is bad and one is good. It just means that there are different soul energetic resonances, frequencies, you could say, vibrations that do certain things. They do different things. They can operate in similar ways. They can have similar intentions. The positive polarity, just like the negative polarity, can have intentions for growth and for healing, but the resonance of those energies, depending on what polarity it is, can manifest in different ways. The negative polarity has a lot of catalytic energies that come from it, things that dissolve, things that break down to then create space for new, whereas the positive is kind of like more growing, more building on top of. And of course, the balance of both of these is the death and the rebirth cycle that every single one of us goes through and every single one of us has to experience in order to evolve as a soul and in order to understand who we actually are and what we're doing here. And it's all beautiful. It's all valuable. So as I was saying, there is a source of the galaxy itself and energies that support that source in regards to what is needed within this ecosystem for proper growth to take place. And this happens over and over and over again within different solar systems, within different galaxies, and within different universes, infinitely expanding itself. So to answer the question, who is the real God? What is the real God? All of it is God. And there is a source consciousness that is at the highest resonance of frequency or density that we can't even understand as human beings. I can't even sit here and try to break it down. But it's there, and it's creating all things from itself. And we're all a part of it. And we carry that energy inside of us. And we're on a journey of understanding more about this connection that we have. And understanding more about how this connection manifests itself in all things. So that the way that I treat you is actually how I'm treating myself. And understanding the way that you treat me is how you treat you, because we're not separate. Okay? And it sounds all fun, and it sounds easy to kind of start to work with these ideologies and work with these belief systems until you have to start looking at the things that you hate the most, or you have to start looking at the things that make you the most uncomfortable and realize that you also have a reflection in those things as well, in those people as well. And that's where the deepest parts of your own unconscious and things that you're repressing inside of your system start to show themselves in the world around you. And you have an opportunity to work with those and observe those and see those and process it and let it go, and process it and feel it and let it go, rather than attaching and fighting against and separating from. Okay? So that is what we want to understand. Is God a he? How many people do you know refer to God as him, Father, Father God, Lord God, he, him? Right? Once again, the reason why so many people say that is because of religious indoctrination. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as if God is not also feminine, as if God is not also a her or a she, right? In reality, God is it. It is all. It is beyond just man and woman. It is it. It is all things. So when I like to speak about source, I refer to source as an it. It is just the source. It is not him. It is not he. I can say that if I really want to, but it's not that. And it's not just her, and it's not just a she. It is an it. It is all things. That's another thing that we really do want to understand when we are speaking about this, source intelligence, and when we're understanding the nature of this consciousness and the nature of this energy and how it manifests itself. Okay? So the next piece that I wanted to address in today's video was along the lines of, does the source, or does God punish you when you make poor choices and when you make bad decisions? Do you actually get punished? Does it want you to learn from your mistakes and do things to you that hurt you, that make you have to go through pain and suffering because you made that mistake, or because potentially you've sinned? So where does sin fall into place with all this? The first thing that we need to know is the source operates directly under unconditional love. The source wants nothing but soul growth to take place. And it understands that in order for growth to happen, there is a balance of positive and negative energies that a soul must experience to have a healthy balance of growth to unfold. So the source is always working towards this cosmic intention of having your best interest at heart and making sure that you go through and experience exactly what it is that you need to become your most authentic, powerful self, satisfied self, really. That is the true nature of this source consciousness. Does it mean that everything is meant to be butterflies and rainbows and generally a walk in the park when it comes to this growth process? No. There are times where we have to absolutely go through the death phases, the shadow process of experiencing things that are really uncomfortable that we most often would rather avoid. But that's a part of it as well. So when it comes to sin, okay, like the 7 deadly sins or just sinning in general, a lot of these things can be representations of unhealthy patterns. But does that mean that you're being judged by God if you are doing these types of sins or if you are sinning? And the answer to that question is the only way that you're going to be judged or punished by God is if you are doing that to yourself, because you are God and you have that God within you. So if you are punishing yourself and you're judging yourself and you're shaming yourself and you're guilting yourself and you're trying to keep things repressed within you, because you're supposed to appease to something outside of you that you think is God, then you are inherently cutting off your source connection. And you are guilting and shaming yourself, basically subconsciously communicating that you are not good enough and that you need this external energy to make you good enough. And that is inherently going to lead you to sinning more. And it's not that sin is a bad thing in itself. It's just that oftentimes sins are just as simple as unhealthy forms of coping for a lack of self-love, a lack of understanding self. So imagine being a part of a religious belief system where you're led to look outside of yourself for salvation and not honor your source connection. And because of it, it fuels your need to actually have unhealthy forms of coping, which look like sins, because you don't know who you are and you don't honor yourself and you're not processing what is important to process. So you're looking for unhealthy ways to escape. You're looking for, toxic relationships to have sex with people that are not healthy for you. You're looking for drugs, alcohol, marijuana. You're looking to run away through eating, unhealthy foods all day long. You're looking to just hurt yourself. And then that's sinning. You're not following what feels right for you. You're not listening to your calling. You're not following your intuition. You're not honoring all of your emotions because there's a God that forgives you. And as long as you look outside of yourself and seek the approval of this God, everything's all good. When in reality, you've got a bunch of trauma that you need to face. You have your own shadows that you need to surrender to and learn how to be with so you can heal them, so that you can start following your intuition, getting in touch with it, and honoring your body's sensations and emotions. So you can heal and no longer have to escape yourself because you hate yourself. You can start loving yourself. So does God punish you? No. You punish you because you carry God inside of you. Okay? The next thing that's important to understand along these lines is karma, which is the law of cause and effect. So when you are doing things that are outside of your source connection, like worshiping a God outside of yourself, seeking for salvation, or any form of unhealthy coping, there is karma that is building up. There is an energetic buildup of things that get repressed because you're using escapism and you're using mechanisms to not look inwards, so that energy builds up, and it eventually builds up to a point where it gets to you and it hits you, and then you have to face the consequences, or you have to face that energy that eventually comes back to you by experiencing the buildup of everything that you've been repressing, which most oftentimes is going to be a bunch of more negatively charged energies. Most people are in avoidance to their sadness, their anger, their fear, their feeling of weakness, their abandonment wounds, their guilt, their shame, right? Their anxieties. People don't like to feel these things. They don't like to visit memories from the past of when these things happened to them or when they felt that way. And they have these wounded parts of themselves that are existing inside of their bodies, their nervous systems. And then we use unhealthy coping and we use all these other modalities and mechanisms to try to get away from what we're feeling underneath the surface. And that's karmic. It builds up karma. It builds up an energetic resonance of you're eventually going to have to face this, because the pressure builds up so much that it pops the lid. And when that happens, if you're subscribed to a belief system that says you are getting punished by God, then you start to think that God is doing this to you. You start to once again look outside of yourself and almost blame your parent for the problem that's taking place. Except the only difference is now you're saying it's God. God is the reason why you're going through what you're going through, because you sinned, because you did something wrong, because you weren't following his commandments or you weren't following his orders. When in reality, you were making decisions that were separating you from yourself, and you're just paying the price of what you were doing to you. And you can work through that karma by refacing yourself. The only thing is, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be intense once that karma builds up, and that's okay. It just means you have to face it. You have to be with it. Or you can try to scapegoat it and say God is punishing you, and further separate yourself and lose your source connection, or lose your connection to your authenticity, and not listen to your intuition, and just kind of, in many ways, be a slave to this external energy that this book that was man-made told you is the one and only God, and this is why he punishes you. It's such a ridiculous existence to live in, and it boggles my mind that people subscribe to this and stay with this for their entire lives. But I can also understand why. It's comfortable. You can just live a regular, mediocre, comfortable life where you're not truly satisfied, but you're at least comfortable because you understand your triggers to the point where you're just like, this is what life is, and I'm never going to get past it, so I might as well just endure this same cycle over and over and over and over again for the rest of my existence. People stay in that because they don't have the courage to go into themselves and to step into the unknown and to honor how they're actually feeling, and being willing to let go of the things that are not in alignment with who they're supposed to be. They just don't have the courage to do that. And it's unfortunate, but different people are at different places in regards to their soul's development. And at the end of the day, there's no judgment there, but you will pay the price. It will be your own karma that you've brought to yourself. So God does not punish you unless you punish you, unless you shame, you guilt, and you judge you. Okay? So hopefully you can take what I'm saying and you can use it in more so of a liberating type of way, so that you're not shackled by these confines of what a lot of people get stuck with. This is absolutely valuable and important to understand. So make sure that you take advantage of everything it is that I am currently teaching right now, because I promise you it is going to offer you a lot of value. And if you carry this understanding and attach it to your tool belt and you walk into everyday life, you can start to see things from a much broader and a much wider perspective that most people don't put in the effort and the self-development to understand. But you're here right now, you're listening to this content, you're absorbing this wisdom that is becoming a part of who and what you are. And I'm relaying that to you. That's my intention. Okay, so with that being said, this is going to wrap it up. If you got value from this today's video, hit the